I'm hardest on the people who I'm closest to, and pretty permissive of people that are strangers. I will say is the exact opposite of Amrita.
Yeah.
Who's very permissive of the people she's close to, and
very hard on strangers.
So together we're hard on everyone.
But also easy on everyone, though.
Also easy on everyone.
Welcome to Don't Think Twice. VJ and Stevens is the writing and producing duo of Amrita, VJ, and Andrew Stevens. Best friends, business partners, creative partners, and now soon-to-be co-parents. We froze embryos together in 2020 and are currently pregnant. There's a lot to get into. Clinical psychologist and dear friend Marina Weiss meets us where we're at. In this episode, how has a lifetime of unconventional choices, professionally, personally, creatively, contributed to the decision to make a family in an unconventional way? How do friends evolve into being partners, family, parents? How does our identity as artists play into all of this?
How has your decision to be a chosen family been received by people in your life?
Most of our family, of course, and then most of our friends have been around for years. And because our relationship developed from a very ordinary relationship that was easy to understand, and people got to know us as friends for years, it's been a very natural process, almost like people are like, oh yeah, of course. There hasn't been a lot of explaining that has to do from broader family members and things like that. Unfortunately for me, my immediate family and my brother and my mom being the two really have to bear the brunt of that more than I do, in that they are the ones who are approached to explain.
Yeah. Mm. And do you think that they do a good job of that? Or you don't know?
I don't know.
Okay.
But I know their intent, and I don't care if they don't do a good job of it.
I think that's a fair answer. No, because I think it's similarly probably my family is often put in a position, and I feel like my sister's somebody who just she's like, oh, it makes perfect sense and it doesn't require explanation. My parents, I think, are probably, when they're put in that position, probably don't feel like they have the right vocabulary and maybe don't know how to explain it. And I don't know that I've provided them with that
right
good vocabulary either. But yeah, I mean, I guess we would maybe ask you as a person who knows us, does it seem to make sense to a friend who knows us?
Yeah, I mean, and I think I knew about it before some other people did, in some ways, because I was considering some of the processes as well. So I'd talk to you some about parts of it.
You mean about actually reproducing?
Yeah, about actually reproducing. Yeah. And so I felt excited that I was privy to this special plan. Mm-hmm. I felt like we were all in on a subversive secret. And I was by telling me about this plan, you were including me in your special club of chosen family. And it was such an honor for me. And also as someone who had really struggled with this internal conflict between the social messages that you're describing of wanting to feel that I belonged, that I had people who were tight and important to me, and also wanting to feel that I had independence, and wanting to reject some kinds of misogynistic rhetoric about women needing to be completed by romantic experiences.
Yeah, or for that matter, being completed by parenthood. Mm-hmm. Because that's the other thing that you can do as a single woman is you can just be a single mom, and that also helps you complete the drawing as you're supposed to or whatever. And that I think is also the part of this false binary is that it's you eat if you want to have a kid, you either do it in the confines of your nuclear closed circuit family, or you do it alone and make this unconventional choice to or sometimes not always a choice, but yeah, you make the choice to do it as a single parent, thinking about that as also being more of a spectrum of not just A or B.
Have you always known that you wanted children?
For me, absolutely not. And in fact, I think I was pretty assured that I did not want to have children. And I would say like I was probably over 90% that it was not something that I was interested in. It wasn't something that I wanted. So for me, it was more of an evolution of being able to how do you think about it, of like what was it that I was actually rejecting? Was it the notion of being a parent, or having a child, like being involved in a child's life, or was it like the way in which I was supposed to do it? And like I think that took me a really long time to untangle, that it's like, well, the thing that I didn't want was to be in the role, like the role as I sort of traditionally conceived it, of being like a wife and a mom. Not that there's anything wrong with that. It's just like that for me, I could never picture myself in that script. So for me, then like it was sort of a literal throwing the baby out with the bathwater, where it was like, well, then that thing is not for me. So I don't want that. I don't want to think about it. So it really wasn't until the idea was introduced, and I'm not sure that I can remember how, of being able to do it in a different format that felt really freeing to me, of like opening the door to a possibility that I had like really completely written off. So really, being the process of right now being pregnant is I'm just now thinking of like, oh yeah, like how do I picture myself as a parent, because I've never done that before. And I think, I presume that the answer is a little bit different for you.
I did not always want to be a parent, in the sense that there seems to be other people for which that is a top priority, the priority. So if I think about the things that I've wanted in my life, that I know I've wanted, they all sort of fall in a creative, professional capacity. I've always been interested in exploring having a child and having children. It was perfectly fine if I didn't have children in my life. It wasn't perfectly fine not to fully explore the possibility. And by that, I don't mean going to a sperm bank and a fertility clinic, but really in my mind thinking through what it means to be a parent, why I'm interested in the possibility. And I always knew I wanted to explore the possibility. But it seems that people who don't have children, there have to be a range too of people who are absolutely from the very beginning, I don't want to have children. But I also imagine there are people who explore the possibility and determine that for the other things they want in their life, a child
doesn't fit.
Doesn't fit.
Right.
It is not the best for them. And that's how I was on having a child. I want to explore the opportunity, but I'm open to getting to a point where it's like, actually, this doesn't align with all the other things I want to do in my life.
So coming back to you for a second, because I think you described like a really interesting shift, Amrita, between thinking that the baby was being thrown out with the bathwater and feeling that, actually there was this alternative way of doing it that felt less constraining. Mm-hmm. Could you say more about like when approximately this happened and what led to that, if you had to guess?
I think for a lot of women, particularly in our exact like age demographic, and I'm talking about like late 30s, mid 30s, late 30s, it becomes sort of like a question that's posed to you with a lot more immediacy of like, the time clock or whatever. And so some of the decisions that we make at this point are less definite decisions and more kind of like kicking the can down the road. Mm-hmm. And that's how I kind of felt about the idea of which we'll talk about more in depth, but like the idea of like freezing eggs, freezing embryos, and going through that process was kind of less a decision that it's going to happen and more a decision to delay the decision. I don't think for me it really clicked into place until we were like very seriously having the discussion of let's do it now. And that is why I like alluded to like that this process of being pregnant has been me like wrapping my head around that, like, oh, this is going to happen. I'm going to be a parent. Mm-hmm. And I'm still doing it. You're nodding because you've witnessed me having these like existential crises more on the day-to-day basis. But it's because I hadn't actually done that work ahead of time, like in any logical way.
So just for the audience, that was like 2 or 3 years ago that you froze your eggs and froze
Yeah.
embryos?
That was
2020.
2020. It was 2020. Right in the middle of summer, pandemic summer, first summer.
Interesting. Do you think that 2020 had anything to do with that decision?
Actually not so much, because we
started the process in 2019.
2019, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So it was like late fall or late summer, fall 2019. But it was that the actual process, like the actual procedure, didn't occur until summer 2020, and probably would have been sooner actually if everything hadn't shut down. And then it was like, well, this is a non-essential, like fully non-essential medical thing. Like we don't need to be in a hospital right now, you know? So if anything, it caused a delay rather than a hastening.
Well, this part of the process.
This part of the process.
But I do think it's a good question to explore how the pandemic impacted our decision making, because I think it did.
How so?
When our professional and personal lives, as all of ours were disrupted so completely.
Combusted, perhaps.
So we were living in New York and stayed in our apartments until our leases expired, which was around August of 2020. And we were having conversations and of course in the summer and the early spring, we had gone through producing embryos that were frozen, viable, and they're frozen. So that had happened. And then we had pivoted to thinking about, what are we doing right now? Are we going to sign leases and sit in our apartments in New York City when what we do professionally requires the world to be opened up to a certain degree? Or
namely events.
Are we going to go
we can't just work remotely.
Are we going to go on an adventure? Are we going to move, or we do something? And so that was when we first lived together. We had never lived together until the fall of 2020, when we spent a month in Detroit, and then we still didn't know what we were doing. And then a college friend of Amrita's just threw out a possibility that Amrita jokingly mentioned to me, of coming to Cape Cod and working in a candy store. And she said, "Isn't that funny?" And I said, "Why don't we do that?" So we spent 3 months of the fall of 2020 in Cape Cod. And then from there in 2021, we went to New Orleans. And so all of this time was the first time that we were living together, which I think elevated the degree of intimacy in conjunction with already having all those conversations about children.
And living together, I think, in much more isolation than we were used to, and that we would otherwise have done, like.
Yeah, and so I wonder if 2020 hadn't happened, the pandemic hadn't happened, and our professional and creative lives and our personal lives had gone in different directions, where we might be today.
I wonder also about the role of using that time, because I thought of you at that time as taking that time to go write things that you wanted to write together. Like I thought you were having like a fun creative retreat together. I wonder about the role of that and kind of building that intimacy creatively in that slightly different capacity, because you were previously running a events business together, very high-end events business. Everyone holler at them for your high-end book events.
Yeah, we were working together creatively, but not in such a, to your point, like intense fashion, until really all those professional aspects were removed by necessity. So then our full-time work was just creating together, and we were already writing. We already had some scripts done at that point that we had co-written. But yeah, I do think I do definitely think that creative collaboration is a form of intimacy, and it is the degree to which we experienced that year. It was our first time being full-time writers. And what you said is true. You described it, that the impression is that, we were like sort of on a creative adventure, and we were writing, and we were experiencing having this like full-time artist life. It was also true that we were sort of just reacting to a complete like disaster. Really, it was like we had no sense of whether our business would ever return. And for me, like leaving New York, I didn't have a sense of whether we would return to New York even, which was really difficult, because I've spent we both have our entire adult lives here, and we just put our stuff in storage, and then it was like, we might be back in a month, we might be back in a year, we might not ever.
Because we're not just living together and just living our day to day as you might a roommate. We're also living together and coming together to do work and having to tell each other like, yeah, I know you've worked all day on that, but that's actually
but we got to throw it out. None of that. Not one thing is usable.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
As a friend who stayed in New York and saw a lot of people leave during the pandemic and was terrified that people like you would not come back, I was so grateful that you did come back. But overall, my impression is that both of you are extremely flexible, right? In the service of your creative vision. If it had made more sense for you to do that in order to further your creative pursuits, you would have done so in some way. And I wonder what led you to decide that like late summer 2022 is the time that you wanted to
Come back
and also pursue getting pregnant.
We really decided in 2021, right before we moved back to New York, was when we decided that now is the time, let's just do it. And that was it was sort of capricious in the sense that we didn't have a plan for when we were returned. We didn't know whether we would be still doing the same things professionally. We were just kind of like, well, it seems like there's at least enough kind of stirrings of things happening in our fields that we could figure something out. So we didn't really have a strong plan for that. So, but at the same time, it was kind of one of these things where, that truism, like there's never a good time to have kids, and it's like, do we wait until we feel super resettled in our new professional life? And I think maybe that would have been true if we hadn't just had everything decimated in 2020. But then it was like, well, nothing is guaranteed to us. Like nothing is assured. We could think that we had our shit completely together, and then it could all be taken away as fast as it was taken away in March 2020. So what's the point of waiting for some future point of stability before we pursue this thing if we want to do it? Like that's how I felt. Maybe that's not how you felt, but
we went to Detroit, we went to Cape Cod, we landed in New Orleans, and we did all of those things without having a next plan. When we left Cape Cod, we went to New Orleans and we thought we'd leave. We booked a place to March. We got to March, we still liked it. We booked a place to April. We got to April, we booked a place
till June.
So we kept going until we left in October. And we were talking about children in New Orleans. And I think we were talking about having children in the same way we were thinking about the not knowing what the future is going to be, but not letting that prevent us from doing something that we know we want to do.
Yeah.
That's really a wonderful way of talking about it, and also makes me think about this idea of queer futurity that like Jose Munoz writes about and that I learned about through Joe Osmondson. But basically this idea that, if we don't have reproductive children, maybe our creative acts or our professional acts or our chosen family are our contribution to humanity.
Yeah.
And maybe if we have children, they're part of that, but they're not the only contribution that we're making, right? And so thinking about, the way that you're thinking about the uncertainty around the futurity of all of these pieces, not just your creative life, but also of potential reproduction, feels like it fits within that kind of lens.
Mm-hmm.
Having other responsibilities, and especially a child, will change the trajectory of my life, and it will require commitments. I don't presume that I know where I'm sitting right now, that like I have something in me that will not become better or richer or different than by including something else in my life that I find meaningful. So I guess I'm saying that I just don't want to shy away from doing anything in my life if I find it meaningful, for fear that something else, other part of my life suffers.
Well,
I don't understand how that
I think
can
that's
be.
that's a bigger topic too, because like I have had that fear quite a lot, specifically about children. And the idea that I think this is maybe just a theme in literature or art, that it's like that particularly as a woman, you have the opportunity to create either great art or children. And those are exclusive to one another, and I really bought very, very deeply into that idea that if I have a child, then all my creative energies and my like ability to generate things, it becomes channeled into that. And therefore at the expense of my creative self and my creative life. And, and that honestly is still a fear of mine. That's like a big fear. And that's sort of my biggest fear around having children is to lose my creative self. And I very much I love hearing you say that, because I think that is true, that it's like, these are life experiences that make your life richer, that make you a better artist, that make you a better person. Not, children particularly, but like living life fully and like doing the things you want to do are all important to sort of becoming a better person, richer person, and that makes you a better artist. And I have to believe that is true because I want that to be true of myself.
I totally believe that that's true, and I also believe that for children, we may believe that because we as children saw that. We saw our parents compromise themselves for us in ways that might not have been necessary.
Yeah.
Right? Or might have taught us something that was actually potentially damaging about what parenthood meant or what intimacy meant. Right?
Or what sacrifice.
It was like, oh, well, then I, as the woman, sacrifice myself for my children or for my partner. And therefore that makes those prospects less appealing. Right? And it makes it less appealing to be in a partnership or to be in a parenting role. Do you feel that shifted for you, or do you feel that you chose to manage those feelings differently?
The latter, I think. I mean, because we don't know what it's going to look like in reality of, and I don't think we can plan for it as much as we might want to be able to plan for it. And we'll just have to see what that looks like. When I observe other people who have had children, I think there's a lot of just the determination of how you want things to go. And if you're determined that your life will include, certain things, then you arrange your life to make those things possible. So it's really just about the mindset more than anything else. It's just like, well, I know that it's very important to me. I do know that I fear the loss of my creative life and my creative time, my creative self. So that means then that's just something that I have to be sure that I'm protecting really fiercely on the other side of this with the kid, And I think when I look at other parents in my life, I think that provides a really great example for their kids of that their mother or their parent does have things that they are good at and things that are important to them that are outside of this direct relationship, and seeing their parent prioritize those things, I think it's probably difficult when they're very little and they can't process that, but I think it is important in general.
I had sort of thought, oh, you planted the seed of this, I assumed 2019 is the real answer, right? And that you planted the seed of this, and it was something you were planning all along, and you were just like low-key planning it and like not talking about it, and then
really.
One day it was like ready to come to fruition, and you were like, we debut this idea which we have been planning all along. And in fact, it seems like there was an intention to just not close the door to this opportunity, and then some gradual decisions and gradual warming to the idea of children.
So as I remember it, our initial conversations were that, and memory fails me of how we got to this place. My guess is that we were a couple of drinks in some bar south of 14th Street in early 2015.
Yeah.
And I said, I think I'd like to be a parent, it's sort of me like understanding this. And from there were conversations that were had, sporadically. It wasn't like a particular topic of conversation all the time. But at some point, Amrita said, well, if you want to be a father, I'm open to helping you do that. Meaning not being a parent, but providing, the
surrogacy.
Thank you. That is the word.
Yeah.
And because she said, I don't want to be a mom, and I said, I'm happy to be a single parent.
I wouldn't mind peripherally being involved in the life of someone else's child if,
So that was where that started.
Yeah.
And I always said, you can be as involved as, it's not important to me to be a single parent. you can be as evolved as you want to be. The only caveat there being it had to be decided how much you were going to be involved, and it had to
Right.
be consistent.
Yeah.
Any level, as long as it was decided beforehand and was not couldn't change.
It's not like
And-
you opt in and then you can just
And then like the
dip.
baby's there that,
Yeah.
oh, I actually want to be a mom. Well, you should have fucking talked about that
Yeah.
beforehand.
The through line was not that we knew we wanted to do this together as equal co-parents from the start. That was not at all. That was a very recent part of the equation. It was very much like, again, very early, like, oh yeah, maybe it's a surrogate thing. But then even as recently as when we were freezing the embryos, the thought was that no, the child is going to be custodially Andrew's, fully Andrew's, and I will be an interested adult that is nearby,
Right.
available to help, a bonus adult, if you will, but not a parent.
And we had not, before the pandemic and before living together, we had not had a conversation or really envisioned us living in the same
Space.
space.
And do you think that is part of why you came to envision yourself as a more involved parent?
Not necessarily, because I still don't think we haven't decided that we're going to now live together for as long as we're co-parenting
For 18 years.
18 years. That might not be that in the cards. It is right now, and it's going to be convenient for the infant phase. So no, I don't think so. I think it was just sort of the gradual understanding of a parenting format that looks different from what I traditionally had conceived of.
So Amrita's mentioned that her fears are about losing her creative self, or like the energy and capacity to allow her creative self to take space up. What about you, Andrew?
Generally, I am typically hardest on people who are close to me, and very understanding and permissive of people who I don't know, because who cares about them? But the more I care about people, the higher standard I hold for them, which is not always healthy, because I also hold myself to a standard that's impossible. So my greatest fear is holding my children to a standard at all. And I know I can do that in one way, but there are just like so many subtle ways that you send messages, that we all send messages. And so my deepest fear is subtly communicating to my children that I have expectations for them that are beyond the expectations I intend to have for them. And the expectations I intend to have for them primarily have to do with them being citizens in the world, and their being in relationship to other people and understanding other people and
Being nice, being kind,
fundamentally,
and
but
trying their best.
beyond that, my greatest fear is communicating to a kid that I have an expectation of who they are and what they'll do and who they'll be.
I know that we've talked about both of you framing this not as an opportunity trade-off of any kind, but I think that it has been, or you've both told me in different ways, that you've focused less on your prospective romantic relationships during this time. And I wonder how you think about that.
It is evolving as this baby becomes realer and realer, and this Amrita becomes bigger and bigger.
It's happening. It's all happening.
It's evolving. And yeah, I think we need to do a deeper dive about the romantic side of things. There's a lot to talk about.
I look forward to that. And what excites you most about parenthood and the arrival of your little one?
I'm just now like sort of still coming to the realization that this is really happening, and that he's a real person. And I mean, of course, like in the longer term, I think I'm really excited about getting to know this new person who we have no idea like what his personality is going to be like. And we joke about what we think his personality will be like based on nothing other than like he's going to be a Taurus. He's going to be a cozy person. Like he's going to, or maybe he's going to be a jock, like, or, things like that. And I just think that has been really fun, the speculation. Of course we'll be excited no matter what type of person he turns out to be. But I'm excited to see how that happens and see what type of person he is and becomes.
I'm excited about two elements, one related to him, one related to me. They're all related. They're all interrelated though. But in a small way, I'm excited about all the small things, like the whatever, seeing the world through this little person, their eyes as they grow and new things that they get to see. I'm excited about the family traditions, especially the ones that won't strike Amrita and I as traditions because we're grown adults, but we'll be like, we'll do it for 3 years and then he'll be like, are we not going to do that again? So I'm excited for all like the little ordinary everyday elements. And I'm also excited, as hard as it will be, I'm excited that for the challenge in revisiting who I think I am. He's also going to turn around and tell me what he sees of me. And I'm excited for that. Even if what he says, I'm like, oof.
I think your little guy's going to be very lucky to have you and to have our whole chosen family, which you have orchestrated for him.
Yes.
Yeah, that is definitely true. In our next episode, we will get into the gritty details of embryo freezing, the clinic, the hurdles, the cost, and the disgusting porn in the sperm bank collection room. In the meantime, you can find us at vjandstevens.com. That's VIJAY and Stevens with a PH. We're at VJ and Stevens on Instagram. And you can find Marina at marinaweiss.com.